On today's World Insight, Day 1 of the National Security Law for HKSAR, the details and the significance of Hong Kong legal action.
Well, I think the law is pretty clear.
And the future of Hong Kong, and the signed national security law, why they go hand in hand, the reason from a diverse set of prominent Hong Kong figures.
It would not allow foreign power or bodies to interfere with Hong Kong's internal affairs.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. China's top legislative body on Tuesday unanimously passed the national security law for Hong Kong. President Xi Jinping signed a presidential order to promulgate the law, which takes effect immediately. The 163 members of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress began the second deliberation of the bill during its 20th session in Beijing from Sunday to Tuesday and adopted the law of the People's Republic of China on safeguarding national security in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. The meeting, which closed on Tuesday afternoon, also adopted a decision to add the law to Annex 3 of the Hong Kong HKSAR Basic Law. So what are the key details of the law? What does it mean to the one country, two systems? Let's hear from our panelists. On the significance of the national security law of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region in Hong Kong, we are joined by Professor Whitman Hung, who is the Hong Kong Deputy to the 13th National People's Congress and also Principal Liaison Officer for the Hong Kong, Shenzhen and Qianhai Authority. Also in Hong Kong, we have Lawrence Ma, a barrister and also Chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Mr. Ma, now we understand that the law, the details of it, would not be known to the public until today. Now, before coming into the studio, I was rushing to read through some of the most important clauses in it. But how would the common people in Hong Kong know what is legal and what is not legal starting from today?
Well, I think the law is pretty clear, and the phrases and clauses, as well as the sentences and the wordings there in Chinese, are pretty easy to read. So there should not be any equivocation or doubts, at least on the four major aspects of the law.
I understand the law enforcement, mainly the police officers today in Hong Kong, they mainly have a purple flag in their hand on which written some of the specific areas that they want the public to know regarding this law. And whoever they consider might be breaking the law, they would show that flag to them. And if the other party would not change the behavior or the actions or the rhetorics, they might be arrested. Is that how it works, Mr. Ma?
Yes, well, that's the law working in an operation ground level. The law is also about apprehending, arresting, charging, prosecuting, and putting that person to trial and subsequently sentencing that person and eventually imprison him or her in jail. So the holding up a flag would be a first step in the enforcement of the law, so that the potential offender or the suspect would have a knowledge that he has or committing an offense under the national security law.
Mr. Ma, many have been wondering whether the people in Hong Kong will be used to this law. After all, it is a very different political system and circumstances before the law eventually being passed on June the 30th in Hong Kong. So, Mr. Ma, are you confident that people will be able to understand what is the real content of it and also be able to implement it, particularly by the majority of people in Hong Kong, Mr. Ma?
Well, I think the great majority of Hong Kong residents are not terrorists. They are not subversionists. They are all successions, people who engage in successive or succession conduct, nor they would collaborate or collaborating with foreign powers in order to overthrow our government. Not citizens of Hong Kong are not that type of people, but they are lured or they're lured or attracted into or funded or trained to go into activities which now they are pretty accustomed to in activities that destabilize the Hong Kong government and administration. So they have to revert that activity. They have to stop that activity altogether. But of course, we do still have freedom of expression in Hong Kong, so they can freely criticize the government, you know, to put them on the right track, provided that criticism is conducted and carried out by lawful means. If they do it by unlawful means, in provoking hatred against the government, and which resulted in serious legal consequences, that would be definitely an imprisonment sentence imposed hefty on them.
Professor Han, what do you make of the possibility of the police force being able to enforce it on the first day the law is being made public? And how will they be further, getting informed or being informed about the law so that the right actions could be taken? Professor Han.
Well, like any jurisdiction, when there's a new law, there is a period of time people, both sides, okay, both general public and also the law enforcement agency will take time to learn. And they learn it by, taking actions. They learn it by going through cases. You cannot expect like everybody in Hong Kong will understand every single bit of the law. But just like Lawrence just said, most people in Hong Kong has nothing to do with these kind of activities anyway. If in the area of enforcing the law, I already have seen there's a new flag, there's a new purple flag today shown by the police to the demonstrators, basically telling them that the displaying of any kind of slogan for independence of Hong Kong could be, infringing the new national security law and subjected to sentencing. So that is, I think, is a good start. Of course, it takes, we are in a common law jurisdiction. It takes a few cases, trial cases. I mean, I can see the opposition side is already trying to put something to test, but that's fine. I think we should, arrest some people, put them, and then decide whether they should be prosecuted. And then in prosecution, we let the court decide whether these people were really breaking the law or were they, not. And by having those precedent cases in the future, then everybody on those sides understand fully about the law.
Right. If you look at some of the specific clauses, I do have some on hand. For example, it established new offenses of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign powers. There's also a new law enforcement presence from the central government in Hong Kong, which is called the Office for Safeguarding National Security. Meanwhile, there's a National Security Committee going to be established, and the members are made of both of Hong Kong government officials in the HKSAR and special advisor, quote-unquote, coming from the central government. There's also specific clauses about the security commitment as well as the public transport and public services protection. Things related to that, of course, terrorism being mentioned as well, perceived foreign interference in Hong Kong also being mentioned in certain clauses. This is a very wide range of areas to cover. Now, what do you consider will be the most important areas from now on, particularly at the very beginning of implementing this law? Mr. Ma.
Well, that's a big question.
I know it is.
I think I think on the ground level, as we've just seen, we have people who are still holding up Hong Kong independence flags, quote unquote, and that activity would have to be stopped. That's one aspect. And we have also another aspect on an international level where these sort of rioters and separatists are funded. At that level, anyone who sort of collaborates with that foreign power, meaning some of the known political figures in the opposition, would be the target. And many of them have now, of course, kept quiet. But whether their second in charge would continue behind the scene, continue to carry out these directives to fund these ground-level protesters. Now, that would be something that requires investigation. So you will see the law operating in various aspects, not just the lowest, but it goes to the middle level and at the highest level. It's all operative in all aspects and in all facets of lives with respect to those offenders who would be suspected to have committed any type of the laws in our new national security law.
Right. One of the things, if you look at the international press, people are paying much attention to some of the so-called leaders of the pandemic groups. And we saw some of them, Professor Huang, have withdrawn or left, quote-unquote, the original political movement or party as they see it over the past few days. So what's going to happen to these people? And how is this law likely to have an impact on how they are likely to be dealt with by the police authority and also by this National Security Office being established right now?
I think, first of all, I can understand why they do that, because when there's a new law, it would not rule for the actions taken before the law was official. So if they say today or yesterday, and the day before yesterday saying, oh, okay, we have nothing to do with the independence of Hong Kong, we support the basic law, they kind of like, you know, break out from the original group of people that the rioters and all those people who may be subsequently, you know, subject to the punishment of the new law. So these leaders, they're very smart. They just try to distance themselves, and quite rightly so. A new law by itself cannot punish people who has been committing these crimes before the law was official. However, as you can read from the law itself and also from our common knowledge, there are other laws and regulations in Hong Kong that govern various activities in the past. And these laws also have some measures against, you know, people, things related to national security, related to government secrets and things like that. And those laws should be enforced. So, yes, these people, these leaders who are now claiming themselves, you know, away from the movement, may still be punished by other laws, but not by the new national security law.
If they are breaking the law, of course, that is the condition, and also the investigation.
Yeah, if they had broken the law in the past, if they have broken some of the other laws of Hong Kong.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said, and very clearly said. Another question a lot of people have been asking about Hong Kong is, will Hong Kong be the same anymore after this new law comes into being? Now, we've seen Hong Kong coming back to the motherland 23 years. Over the past 23 years, there are different circumstances. From now on, it's not necessarily going to get less complicated if you look at the geopolitics, big power relations, and also some of the things that have an impact on why Hong Kong was like it was over the past few years, which also contributed to the reason why this law came into being. So anyway, so things are not necessarily going to become less complicated. So will this law be able to help us to anchor the stability?
Well, I think international politics or geopolitics, it's always about foreign influences. One country tries to influence another, try to get an advantage out from the other's election, maybe to bring the regime down. The regime is not complacent. The regime is not submissive enough to the foreign interests or the foreign power. So the foreign power topples it. by way of color revolution, which is peaceful, or by invasion, which is more violent. So we have international politics all since whenever there are countries in this world. So this Hong Kong new national security law would have definitely has an effect of curtailing, stopping, or minimizing, or otherwise putting an end to this endless foreign interference.
Professor Huang, your reaction?
Yes. Well, I think first of all, Hong Kong will never be the same. I mean, ever since what happened last year and also what happened in the past few years, Hong Kong will never be the same. But I think the purpose is not to go back to where we were, but go to a Hong Kong that we want. Okay, with this new law, first, just like what Lawrence has said, you know, hopefully, first of all, we will stop the foreign intervention. We will stop the collusion with this. You know, we have seen so much money floating into the movement. I mean, I was just reading the news. There was an arrest of a final year student of Chinese university, and she had been helping money laundering of $300-something million for university students. So these kind of things can be stopped by the new law. Hopefully it can. I mean, I think it still needs to be put into execution. We see the law, we like it, we think it has been thoroughly thought through and try to cover everything, but then again, it all depends on the actual execution. Yes. And also it depends on our good prosecution and court system so that this law can be enforced, you know, in the right way. I think we will never become the Hong Kong we used to know 20 years ago, but hopefully it will be, you know, first of all, more stable. Secondly, people focus more on economic instead of political. And thirdly, our government will try to solve some of the deep-rooted problems we had accumulated ever since, I think, 30 years ago. And these kind of things, we still need to sort it out ourselves in Hong Kong. I mean, but so in short, to your question, the law will safeguard the security, well, national security of Hong Kong, and also put a warning out there so that when foreign government or when some of the local, I call them writers or terrorists or these people, they think twice before they, you know, take the action that they were taking since last June. Okay, hopefully that will happen.
Yeah.
No.
Professor Whitman Hong, Lawrence Ma, thank you so much for joining us. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're watching World Insight. Coming up on our program, the future of Hong Kong and national security legislation, why they go hand in hand, the reasons from a diverse set of prominent Hong Kong figures right after this.
Economic center.
It would not allow foreign power or bodies to interfere with Hong Kong's internal affairs.
Welcome back. This is World Insight. The national security law for Hong Kong came after prolonged social unrest and escalating street violence, which had plunged Hong Kong into its most tenuous situation since its return to the motherland in 1997. What does the legislation mean for Hong Kong and why it is essential? Will it help restore confidence? Earlier, I talked to people from various walks of life in Hong Kong who are welcoming the passage of the law. First, the former president of the Hong Kong Legislative Council, Rita Fan. Could you help me to understand your understanding of the legislation of national security issues related to Hong Kong?
The purpose of this national security law for Hong Kong is really to ensure, first of all, that the one-country system cannot be compromised by terrorist acts, by mobsters' violent actions. And secondly, it also ensures that the secession of the country and the subversion of the government cannot take place. Thirdly, it would not allow foreign power or bodies to interfere with Hong Kong's internal affairs. In other words, to instigate, to plan, to teach the young people to do all kinds of illegal activities. And last but not least, to fight against terrorism. Our freedom, our human right, our freedom of expression, my right to go to any place in Hong Kong that I feel I want to go. These are all compromised because of their so-called pro-democracy and freedom movement. But it is not. Their freedom is the freedom for them only. Everybody else has to give way to what they want to do.
Mrs. Fan, one of the things people are very eager to know is whether this piece of legislation, after the whole process, will diminish the hope of one country system or actually abide by the principles of one country, two systems.
Well, what is one country, two systems? The two system is the capitalist system in Hong Kong vis-a-vis the socialist system in mainland China. There is not going to be any change in this. The other important part is Hong Kong has been given, delegated the power of making our own laws by the Legislative Council, governing Hong Kong on all internal affairs by the Hong Kong SAR government, and judicial independence with the right of court of a final appeal. These are not in any ways compromised by the national security law. National security is for the whole country. Every inch of land of China must be covered by the same national security. Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy and our ability to govern ourselves in most of the areas will remain as it is delegated to us through the basic law. Some people are worried, after this national security law, our human right will be compromised. Well, let me tell you, that is not true. Because in the decision of the National People's Congress, the first item is to ensure that the right and privileges of Hong Kong people will continue. And then, in the basic law, we have articles which ensures that the freedom of expression, freedom of traveling, movement, freedom of speech, all these are protected.
After this decision, after even the SAR government adopted this law and say, let's go ahead with it, how will Hong Kong repair its wounds as a result of political division, as a result of what happened over the past year, as a result of what is still going on right now in the streets, as a result of a very divided society? Mrs. Fan, how is Hong Kong going to do that?
First of all, I think we like to go back to our normal life, where we can work and play as we used to. Secondly, the economy of Hong Kong has already suffered a very, very big blow. So for Hong Kong's economy to recover, it will take some time. And we will have to work on it. We are determined to live the life we want to live. We want one country, two systems. And that system, as prescribed by the basic law, will continue on to work in Hong Kong. We will make sure, because it is our daily life, it is our livelihood. You know, for people who are not in Hong Kong and who are making all kinds of comments about Hong Kong, they don't have to pay any price if Hong Kong goes down the drain. But for a person living in Hong Kong, We are paying all the price for all their so-called ideology or so-called dominance of the world or so-called democracy which destroys democracy itself. I hope that they will understand. But if they don't, we will still go on because we are determined to make our home a livable place.
Hong Kong SAR's economy bears the brunt of social unrest and the COVID-19 pandemic. Hong Kong SAR Chief Executive Carrie Lam said in a statement that Hong Kong SAR government welcomes the passage of the law, which is tailor-made for the city. An MPC deputy and convener of the non-official members of the Executive Council of Hong Kong SAR, Bernard Char Wu Chen, also minced no words, spelling out the need for the legislation. Here's his take on the remedy over national security earlier. Mr. Chen, welcome to CGTN. Let me ask you your take on the legislation regarding national security issues about Hong Kong. What do you make of the very divided opinion, it seems, about the reactions?
I mean, Article 23 of the Basic Law allow Hong Kong to enact this piece of legislation. But for 23 years, we haven't done so. In fact, we did make an attempt back in 2003, but we did not manage to pass it. And so, this has been long overdue. And so, but the event happened last year. Can allow us to wait any longer. I mean, as you can see from the social unrest last year. And not to mention that there are some foreign interference in Hong Kong. Notably, in particular, one country, they have been very vocal about the events in Hong Kong, and politicians from this country even come to Hong Kong to show support to some of the protesters. So I think again, I mean, it is only right for the mainland authority to step in. After all, they have authorized Hong Kong to legislate the law, but we have failed to do so. So I think this is definitely the right direction. But I do agree, though, this is just the first step. We have to do a lot of explaining to the people in Hong Kong that the passing of this legislation will not diminish any, like, for example, freedom of expression. This has nothing to do with freedom of expression, right? So I think this is more about the national security interest that has to be the most important to Hong Kong and to the country. Yeah. So I think once this legislation is passed, I think we have to find out the details, especially about the enforcement. How to enforce this piece of law. I'm sure it will be compliant with the law in Hong Kong as well. I'm sure the Hong Kong government will then have to promulgate this piece of legislation and to put into law. So I think the Hong Kong government would also need to then illustrate what sort of conditions, under what sort of conditions will people violate this piece of law. I think when we first made the attempt back in 2003, one of the reasons why we failed to pass this law back then was that it was not enough explanation was made. People were very concerned about whether they were accidentally got caught in this piece of legislation. So I think once the law is in passed, we have to be very specific and to explain to people under what sort of conditions will allow and not allow, because I think that will clear all these misunderstandings. So I think that's important, the next step for Hong Kong government to take forward.
With the current situation of a challenging international environment for China as a whole, how would the Hong Kong issue, particularly national security related to Hong Kong issue, likely to play it out? Is Hong Kong ready for all possibilities?
Yeah. The social unrest that took place last year in Hong Kong is a mixture of a couple of things. First of all, I think it's partly because Hong Kong is it's a free capital, very capitalist city. So we definitely suffer from the consequences of globalization, as well as these so-called winner-takes-all situations. So people in Hong Kong are frustrated that they feel that they've been marginalized they feel that some of the advantages that they used to lead is no longer there. So I think they feel that they're under threat. Now with the issue rising of China and the U.S. continuously become an issue for Hong Kong, I think we were caught in the middle of all these things. And I'm sure with even COVID-19, clearly, China, and we've done much better in containing the virus than the U.S. So, and again, I think our decision to legislate this piece of national security law will give another excuse for the U.S. To point fingers to China, and they will probably, and they already have, in fact, raised suggestions to impose sanctions on China. It's certainly not helpful. In fact, it's going to even hurt. It's going to hurt not just us, but also the U.S. as well. So this is definitely no-win situation for everyone.
Will the law create a more law-based and stable business environment? Could Hong Kong maintain its status as a global financial hub? David Chu Tai Chung, the head of Far East Consortium International and the CPPCC member, has his answers. What do you then, David, make of the timing and the significance of this legislation, despite of the fact that Hong Kong is pretty much divided already, but this legislation, what does that mean for the security of Hong Kong?
Well, obviously, I think the majority of the people in Hong Kong just want to return to their normal life. And therefore, I truly, for one, believe the quicker the legislation are passed, it will be better for Hong Kong as a whole.
What do you mean by the quicker the better? Why?
Well, because, if I'm sure you see already, there are riots in the street every day. They're beating up people on the street. They're disturbing shopping center. They're disturbing MTR, the train station. The people want, even the people normally driving the car in the street. So if only one comes to Hong Kong, they would realize they are truly disturbing and being a nuisance for everybody day-to-day life of Hong Kong. So therefore, it is only natural and it's understandable why Hong Kong people want to make it as soon as possible, that hopefully they can all go back to their normal life. And frankly speaking, I was born in Hong Kong many years ago. Hong Kong to the world are at its best as an economic center. Hong Kong have never been a political center. Hong Kong served the world best. We are the New York of the East. We are the financial center, we're the tourist center, and we also the door opener for China, which benefit a lot of companies that go into China to invest and vice versa. So I think the world should appreciate the function of Hong Kong are at its best economically, not politically.
But David, as you may know, over the past 1 year or so, when the street violence goes on in Hong Kong, some try to turn away their heads from the facts of the violence, only concentrating on the political division inside the region. What do you make of practices like this? Meanwhile, will the implementation of this legislation further split Hong Kong? Are you going to see more violence in the streets, in a way?
Well, the violence in the street is happening on a day-to-day basis. The fundamental of this national security law, frankly speaking, in my opinion, China have no choice. And Hong Kong also have not the luxury of time. The majority of the people of Hong Kong just want to go back to their normal day-to-day life. So basically, I sincerely believe the majority of the people in Hong Kong are very supportive.
Now, the media business is facing a lot of challenges, whether it's economic challenges or political challenges, not to mention the latest pandemic. How do you think the media has been covering Hong Kong, and how do you think media should cover the latest events in Hong Kong and cover Hong Kong, which is you were born in and grew up in?
I think on the two parts of your questions, I think first is the world should appreciate that Hong Kong, by many organizations, not from China, not from Hong Kong, world-scale, organizations have always believed and give the ranking of Hong Kong one of the freest society in the world. And we have always enjoyed that. And therefore, the press in Hong Kong have also enjoyed so much freedom. I think the world should not take that for granted. As for the freedom of press in Hong Kong, me as the chairman of one of the television company in Hong Kong, I agree. To some extent, there is too much freedom. I think a good media should only report the news, not to be too opinionated. There are a lot of media in Hong Kong, because of the freedom of our society, who become very opinionated. And for the wrong reason. It doesn't serve its best. It doesn't help the prosperity of Hong Kong. And of course, as for your second question, is that being a chairman of television of a company in Hong Kong, one of the free television company in Hong Kong, is not easy. Television are not easy. We are facing a lot of competition. But that's not important. I think what is important that the world, if I may repeat, should appreciate and respect the freedom of Hong Kong that we have enjoyed. And we welcome everybody to come to Hong Kong because of its freedom. And therefore, the world should not take that for granted.
On the other hand, David, Hong Kong has been so much divided. The violence, it has become the norm to a certain extent. So the consensus building inside the Hong Kong society become extremely difficult. That's reflected in the SAR's work agenda over the past 1 year and two. How much confidence do you think the mainland, or shall I say the central government in Beijing, could still have about Hong Kong from your perspective?
I think since 1997, Beijing and China have nothing but been helpful. They gave Hong Kong so many privileges. They give Hong Kong so much support. The people of Hong Kong should not complain. And even we now do occasionally create some disturbance to China, to Beijing. The way I look at it, they continue wanting to support us. They continue believe in the one country, two system. And I think Hong Kong's been very lucky on that way. But Hong Kong on our own is not, we can't always blame it politically. If I may sidetrack a little bit, Hong Kong are not free of just political problem alone. Hong Kong has a lot of economic problem. For example, we all know Hong Kong property price is one of the highest in the world. So, affording your own house are a very difficult issue in Hong Kong. The difference between the richest and the poor are amongst the highest in the world. So Hong Kong has its own other economic, social problem too.
But then how to address these problems when you have political divisions, when any kinds of legislation, for example, with the Legislative Council, has become extremely difficult, when you have a policy, a blueprint of how to address the unprivileged and yet hard to implement. So isn't that a dilemma in a way?
Well, it is a dilemma because Hong Kong, since 1997, we have a unique political situation, as you can see, which is not easy to handle. Well, there's no, at least I don't know the universal questions how to solve all our problems. All I can say, we are moving towards solutions step by step, and I think the national security legislation, with the support of China, is definitely one thing I hope will soon bring back the normal life of the people of Hong Kong.
And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search us, World Insight, or you can also check out our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching. Bye for now. Bye.